And good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. We thought it would be interesting to share this research with you. We know that there's been a lot of discussion about the importance of putting customers at the heart of the organisation, and we hear a lot about doing the right thing. So maybe thinking about using complaints to drive innovation could be one way of demonstrating to the regulator that you're doing the right thing and actually putting the customer at the heart of the business. So we'll have a look at a couple of case studies this evening, just to give you a flavour of some of the work that we've been doing. And also, you might be wondering why, just moving on, why we've got this dividing line here and this backdrop. These images were taken from the old town of Edinburgh, and it's really just pictures of buildings and the paintwork on those buildings. But I thought it was quite a nice way to think about, in relation to complaints, thinking about the two sides to a complaint. And you've got this dividing line here, but actually there are fuzzy edges there, and there's a relationship between both sides. So we'll explore some of that, because we really want to be thinking about rebuilding and enhancing customer relationships when we're looking at how we handle complaints and use them to drive innovation. So this first image there, which is from a Richard Wentworth sculpture, is illustrating very much that this particular ladder, this wobbly ladder, would not meet expectations. And I think that sums up the kind of gap between what we might expect in relation to something and what is often delivered. Though the usefulness of complaints may vary, just like any feedback, a complaint can provide very important information and knowledge that can be used to drive this innovation. So the work that we did was funded by Nesta, which is the National Endowment for Science, Technology and the Arts, otherwise known as the UK's Innovation Foundation. And the focus of this particular study was looking at case studies which had been used to drive innovation in public services. But there were a lot of lessons from the work that we carried out that would be equally relevant in the private sector, which is why I thought it would be useful to talk about it this evening. So for our research, we found 120 case studies, everything from choirs where people were singing about their experiences of a complaint, right through to experience-based design, which I will discuss this evening as one of our case studies. We selected around 11 case studies to weave into our report that was published. And it's quite a long report with a lot of detailed findings in it. But some of the key areas that we were looking at are around eliciting complaints, acting on and valuing complaints, and looking at the outcomes of complaint-led innovation. So we'll just look at each of these in turn. The first one there, eliciting complaints. There are many examples around of innovations in online, mobile and consumer-led channels to encourage people to provide feedback and complaints. One that's very much in the news at the moment is patient opinion. Some of you may be very aware that it's been coming under a bit of criticism from Newsnight in relation to the kind of feedback that's been posted on that particular site. Apparently, staff have been engaged in posting particular points and rating their service at 4.8 out of 5, which is not really what this was designed to do. So it's a bit challenging. So one of the things we have to think about is open channels. We do want to have a really good channel where we prompt people to provide feedback, but we want to keep the frequency clear. We don't want to have static and interference, and that example would be interference with something that's otherwise a good channel for feedback. And is anyone listening? What channels are people talking to? Are we on the right channels with them in order to get their feedback? And it's quite interesting in relation to patient opinion in terms of is anyone listening? They have 2,500 staff registered to receive feedback from the patient opinion website. So actually a lot of people are listening and are engaged in responding to that. And what is recorded? Is it just the formal complaints that are recorded, or do you also record the grumbles and gripes as well, from which you can learn quite a lot? This is another channel, fixmystreet. I don't know if you're familiar with this particular one. Here you can have an app on your mobile phone, and you can, if you see some problem in the street, take a photograph and send it off to your local authority. And today, I had a look at the reports today, and there were things like cars on double yellow lines, fly tipping, dog filing, and uneven pavements. So just those quick things, they can send that information in and get something done about it before it becomes a problem. And just in the last week, they had 2,500 reports and almost 6,000 fixed within the past month. So quite an interesting way of actually gathering feedback from people and getting something done about local communities and making sure they're clean and function effectively. Here's an example taken from RBS, and this is the Ideas Bank that they've developed. And again, it's a source of getting comments from people and crowdsourcing ideas for improvement. And again, I had a look on just to see what was there at the moment, and there was someone grumbling about the opening hours at the moment being 9 till 5 and wanting the opening hours to be from 12 till 10 to suit people who are working. So I suppose it will depend on how many people then come in and start to comment on that as to whether that's an idea that will be taken further. But it's an interesting way, I think, of gathering that kind of feedback. Someone else wanted pie charts on how he was spending his money. I've got a couple of case studies to illustrate some of the work that we were doing for the Nesta report. And the first one is around acting on and valuing complaints. And this is about an experience-based design case study. And it was taken from Luton and Dunstable Head and Neck Cancer Clinic. And what was happening was that following diagnosis of cancer, people were complaining because they felt the treatment was insensitive. So at their first appointment, having just found out they had cancer, they were being bombarded with information about surgery, about nutrition, about cleaning tubes and all sorts of things that they actually could not absorb because it was such an emotional time for them. And that image, the Barbara Kruger image, your body is a battleground, kind of sums up how people were feeling. One patient felt that she'd had limited time to digest what had happened and made a complaint. And what they decided to do was they invited people to keep a diary, to make a film of their experience, and also to keep a photo journal. And they brought all of that information together, and they had an event with staff and patients. And that was a great session where people were then able to find out what was working well about the service and what needed to be improved. And what came out of that was that it prompted 40 improvements to the service. Some of them quite simple things like actually spacing out appointments, or having a mirror with lights so that people could clean their equipment properly. So there were all sorts of things, and also the patients themselves were volunteering to help provide solutions. So they were co-designing leaflets, information leaflets with staff. So there were a whole series of things. And so 40 improvements in that one cancer clinic completely transformed the future experience for people. And you can imagine if you rolled that out throughout the NHS in similar cancer clinics, the impact of that is absolutely transformational. So it's a really good example of bringing down divisions and building new relationships. And really, it's seeing complaints, you can think about them as an endowment of knowledge. But obviously, endowments we often want to receive. But you have to use them wisely. So try using complaints as a spark to ignite these important improvements. The second case study I wanted to discuss this evening is one about the outcome of complaint-led innovation. And it's called Tell Us Once. And this was a situation, it began with a complaint from one man whose elderly father was fatally knocked down by a car outside the local post office. His mother attempted for months to cancel her late husband's pension, road tax, and various other documents. And this frail, grieving widow repeatedly received requests for the same documents from organisations. So she felt that she was in this never-ending circle of bureaucracy. And the final straw came when the widow was told to return to the post office where her husband had been knocked down in order to cancel her pension. So her son complained about this and about this insensitive and inflexible response to this situation. And what this did was it prompted a partnership of central and local government departments to get together. And this was really quite a massive undertaking at government level to get all these people round the table and to develop this kind of service. And so from one complaint, we've got a service that's been transformed. What happens now is that you can register the death. You can be given, you're given the opportunity to have this unique reference number, and the government department will then take care of all the cancellations to pensions, road tax, passports, all of this. And so I think you can see that that has really transformed the experience for everyone, and not just for the person that's had the complaint. And I'm not planning to go through this, you'll be pleased to see, but it's a framework that we developed and have discussed in detail within our report. And it just sets out the various elements to what can help to create the right climate for innovation to arise from complaints. It's a fairly complex business, but it's an interesting one to look at. And so just finally, to finish off, I thought, well, could we repeat the kind of work that we've done in relation to the public services in relation to financial services? Would there be an appetite for finding good case studies in relation to financial services that would also illustrate this kind of innovation? And just more broadly, how can the research we do help you in your role to do your work more effectively? So that's all I was going to say this evening, but very, very happy to pick up on any of these points in the Q&A session. And the report is available for you. You can just link onto it, and there's a copy of the executive summary in your packs. So thank you very much for listening.